Hello, everyone. Here's Aline Global Technology again. Welcome to my podcast. And today I have a special guest here with me. And before I make the introduction, I would like to ask you to subscribe the button and follow me on YouTube and other platforms as well. That's how we get connected and then listen all the topics, important topics about technology, and please don't forget to do that. I really appreciate it. Today, I have, like I said, a special guest, which is he has been working for so long in quality control for such very important companies up there in UK. That's where he's talking to me today, and in where he's located as well. And I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee, USA. That's we got connected for a couple months ago, and he also posted very interested topics about quality control, and that's the reason we are connected today. And we want to share his thoughts and answer our questions and have his answers, and hopefully can help you as well. His name it is Mr. Paul, Dr. Paul Palmer. Thank you so much for your time here with my podcast, Alina Global Technology. Hopefully, it will be not the first and last. I really appreciate your time to speak with me today. And if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, that people can get to know you as well and what you have done in quality control, that would be very helpful too.
Okay, thank you, Alina. So, as she says, Dr. Paul Palmer. I'm based in the UK, down on the south coast. I've been in pharmaceutical manufacturing and supply chain, including clinical now, for 40 years. So I started in 86. I started in microbiology, then on to quality control, then quality assurance. I've been a QP qualified person for 22 years. I've been an auditor since 98, 28 years. I'm an RP, so responsible person for wholesaling, RPI for import into the UK. But also I've got my own company. So my company, Paul R. Palmer Limited, launched in 2011. I have a team that support me. We carry out supplier audits. We help companies with their market access into the UK and EU. We can carry out supplier performance audits for you. We can help with rectification of inspection findings if needed. And even if you just want a license, we can help with setting up a first license in the first place. Over to you, Alina.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all this. This is very important and very helpful as well for those that are listening to us. Um, why don't you start tell us why it's so important to invest in quality assurance and quality control?
Well, quality assurance, first of all, it's there to protect you. You see, assurance is about what you do before the event. Rather than a lot of the times people think about, well, we've made a mistake. What can we do about it? How do we fix it? Well, in actual fact, if you implement good quality assurance practices, it protects your brand. Just a single mistake, a product that goes out and kills somebody, can damage trust. Quality assurance reduces customer complaints, legal issues, rework, and of course negative reviews. Although we're less open to that in the pharmaceutical industry, is more likely to be something that the regulators come and find you. You might have a feedback to the competent authority, which maybe the FDA, maybe MHRA, whichever, and then they come and say, well, what's going wrong? Of course, there's the financial loss. You can have refunds if you've not delivered the right quality. You lose contracts, operational delays, legal exposure. I remember, now then, how long ago was it? 15 years ago, I was working for a company who was about to lose their NHS contract. They had an issue with the labeling of some vials, and I joined the meeting, and they were, we don't know how to deal with this. We don't know what to do next. So I said, well, I'll help you find a solution. So I went out and I audited a supplier for them that could actually address the issue. I did the oversight of that supplier during the rework process. And I got it to a point where they were actually able to fulfill their monthly contract, which was valued at 70,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just the fact that they'd retained the contract. It also went along with other products. So they retained that one product part of the contract, but all the other rest of the group of products that had been agreed with that contract. And then on top of that, they didn't have to pay the penalties. So actually saving the 70,000 product was a lot bigger, 70,000 a month. It was about 1.5 million we saved, recovered from a defect,
Mm-hmm.
a labeling error. And to do that, I had to go and do all the assurance activities first. And then
Mm-hmm.
we had to do the QC tests afterwards. So if you do prevent rather than fixing the problem, because obviously that's an example of fixing the problem. If you prevent the issues first, you don't have those reworks, so you increase productivity. If you've got well-trained employees, they make less errors. In theory, they work faster, but really, the work that they get done faster is because they're not having to redo things. They don't hesitate because they're not sure what to do with it, because they can follow a clear process.
Mm-hmm.
Often they require less supervision as well. Gives
Mm-hmm.
you consistency. Interdepartmental consistency is really important. If, for example, the start of the line, they've got a procedure in place, but it doesn't align with what they're doing next. Maybe you finish at a different point. Maybe you've got 2 steps more that they needed to take, and then the next team can't actually do their activity. By having an aligned quality assurance system, which you've got your self-inspection in place, you make sure that those handovers work.
Correct. And why it's so important as well for employees taking certifications, and also companies get certified by, for example, as IS, one of the best certifications in our industry in pharmacy, for example. Why is so important to take these certifications?
Well, it's not required in all countries, but often you'll find that in the manufacturing for the healthcare industry, if you want to progress, then you need to
Mm-hmm.
know more.
Yep.
If you want to get approval from a customer, they're going to look for what certifications you've got. So you may have ISO 9001. Well, that's a tick mark.
Mm-hmm.
Government regulations often only will work with, for example, the UK NHS will only work with limited companies. They won't work with
Mm-hmm.
individuals most of the time. They have to
Mm-hmm.
take them into the company, into the a specific system. Quite a lot of clients that I work with require certification. They verify it as part of their supplier approval. And of course, for international contracts, they need a way of verifying that you're going to be able to deliver what you're saying you can.
Mm-hmm.
US regulated industries follow the FDA standards. You can get certification, you can get approvals. In Europe, CE marking for medical devices. In Brazil, in Metro certification. So
Right.
it may be that it's not required, but often you find that it's helpful because you can get through the process to be approved faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Now, before diving a little bit deeper in training, that's our topic of this conversation today. I'd like to ask you why some business, by your experience, you see a missing or a lack of the investment in quality assurance department, for example. Why there is a sometimes we find even professionals, right, uh, not willing to do things in the right way, to avoid legal cost,
Mhm.
to avoid it big issues, risk, finance risks. What's going on in the market right now? How have you noticed that? I haven't noticed this, and it makes me also myself ask this question: what's going on in our industry with professional people that sometimes I see missing skills, or other times they do have skills and they are very qualified. Okay, they might not have a good certifications, like you said, in your region it does need it required to have a certification, for example, but they do are qualified, but there is things behind does not belong with our expectations, because once they start working they start giving signs that they are not delivering a good job. So in your opinion, what's going on with this market?
Well, people have a tendency to invest in systems, in computerized tech systems, in technology that deliver things in a certain format. So you're probably aware that different people have different learning styles. And if you
Hmm.
just use one format, say you've got a screen in front of you and all you're doing is reading through an SOP, well, all you're really doing is a checklist. You're doing a tick box exercise. What you need is something that's actually going to give the person that's learning some sort of competence in applying that what they're learning to their function. If you
Hmm.
try to just um, if you try to just give them tasks to do without
Hmm.
understanding it, then the likelihood when they try to apply it is they'll get it wrong because they didn't understand why they were doing it that way. And what I find is in a lot of companies, because they don't invest in the training in such a way that people gain competence, they just get a certificate.
Hmm.
That they get disheartened. They find that they don't get the result that they expected from the training. So the person isn't better or faster or more competent or more capable of doing the activity they wanted. So
Hmm.
the training that they're sending them on loses credibility. And when it loses credibility, they say, well, that didn't work when we tried to do that before, so we're not going to do it again. So they reduce the budget. And they say, well, instead of that, we'll set up a system. We'll buy a new
Hmm.
computer and we'll integrate the learning management system to the document management system. And because
Hmm.
we put them together, we'll know exactly what people are doing. So we'll know how to make sure that they've done what they're supposed to do. But when the quality of the activity that you're asking them to do is not to a high enough standard, they still fail.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they end up changing staff because staff get demotivated because they're constantly being criticized for something they haven't had adequate training in.
Correct. Yeah, I can see that. And why, in your experience, tell us why it's so important CEOs and making decision makers in the pharmacy industry, for example, it's so important to invest in training.
Well, I turn that around. When I talk to CEOs or heads of,
Hmm.
and they say, oh, well, if we invest in the training, then they might leave because they're more qualified. So somebody else wants them to go to their company.
Right.
But the thing is, if you don't invest in training, imagine if they stay and they're not trained to a high enough standard to do the job. You end up with an increased amount of rework. You lose credibility because they consistently do a bad job.
Hmm.
You lose the internal controls. Your compliance goes out the window. Next time you have an inspector come in, it's got lots of issues to pick up on. You find
Hmm.
without the training, you're not scalable because you'll get inconsistencies in the way things are done. Training allows you to build systems that scale. Your leadership gains authority because they understand that they want you to achieve more. When you invest in quality, you get structure, you get professional, you get recognized as professionals, and your business process becomes sustainable.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, question for you. When you talk to CEOs, making them understand how important them investing their money in training, instead buy a new software or a new application or do a big migration, for example, what do usually you tell them to convince go back to the foundation and give a very strong training or create a very strong training process. Instead, move on to the next new um, technology transformation, for example.
So I tell them to look at what they're doing now and look at where the problems are. And I usually go through some sort of assessment with the team. So the assessment looks at their base level knowledge. Because if you're doing something badly already and
Mm-hmm.
you introduce a system that's going to speed up how you do that thing badly, well,
Mm-hmm.
instead of enhancing the company, you're going to speed it up to get worse. And that failure to work together is only going to be highlighted more by a digital system, a technological system. So you need to fix the problem first, which often means you bring people up to a baseline understanding. And from
Mm-hmm.
that baseline, you can then build on it. But if you find that some people are at this level, some people are at this level, but they haven't got the low level knowledge from these ones, so there's no overlap, and these ones don't understand the high level knowledge, then can't work together because they don't understand each other. But to
Mm-hmm.
get that base level understanding of how the business works, of what's needed, of how things fit together, it's really important to understand each other when you communicate, be able to deliver on time exactly what they need to be able to go to the next stage. And that's what competence is rather than training. If you're
Mm-hmm.
just training somebody to fill in a form, but something comes up that's different, they won't get to the next stage. They'll escalate and ask somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
It really makes more sense to have a good grounding. Imagine you're building a bridge and you build
Mm-hmm.
it on sand. Well, the sand is not stuck together. You've not got any integration of the people working together, and the bridge sinks. I bring up the bridge because that happened back in the 80s when I was living up near the Humber Bridge. It sank because they hadn't worked together. One side
Mm-hmm.
of the bridge was on different mud to the other side. So one of them was on sand, one of them was on clay,
Mm-hmm.
and the one on sand sank. Now, if you build on a good foundation, a strong foundation, then your level of knowledge increases together, and the business improves as the team works together,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being all over the place and it just some parts fall down and then there's nothing to support the higher level.
Right.
You can what I found when they brought in um, graduates. When I was in microbiology, they brought in graduates, but the graduates had no idea how to prepare for the job that they needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the preparation of the plates required a certain skill, which I'd been doing for 3 years as during my training. I was part-time doing my degree. So I had to train the graduates that had already been studying and passed maybe 5, 6 years, but they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do the work. They could
Yeah.
do the mental part, but they had no idea how to do the basics. Because they didn't know how to do the basics, they couldn't apply their advanced knowledge because
Right.
they didn't understand how to apply it from the information they were getting as an input. Because basically they'd had a technician to do it all for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you basically are saying the time investing uh, will be work first of all with the high top, with the decision makers, with the CEO,
Mhm.
and then after that dropped to managers, supervisors of the production line, for example, for this can be share and spread with other workers in a manufacturer I'm talking about, right?
Mhm.
Because, like you said, young generation just graduated, for example, they don't have all those information training, the basic foundation, because they are a lot of times they're so ahead advanced with the school, but they don't have the experience.
Mhm.
So they have someone to have to go through the process and training them to merge with the company structures, and then also the company culture, how
Mhm.
important it is to prioritize quality control and why they're doing that, right? That's from my understanding.
Yeah.
Now, when you're talking about that, we also thinking to it has to be something that comes naturally and not come with so aggressively to make the change that happen, because and on top of that we are work with human, we don't want to lose people, we don't want to have a high turnover in our manufacturing, but also we don't want them miss the conception what is the truly quality control means.
Mhm.
Because one thing it is learning from school, another thing is when we implement and working in a company. Is that
Very
makes
different.
sense what I'm saying? That's what I have been seen and noticed, work with people on this specifically, in quality control, right?
Mhm. Yeah. I remember a managing director for a full site I was working on once. He he used to there's an approach called management by walking about. And he used to come down to the manufacturing floor, the shop floor. He was an engineer by trade, and he'd risen up from the ranks, but he knew the basics. And a lot of the time, he would go into the meetings with the head of production, and he'd understand more than the head of production because he'd walked around and he'd talked to people and he'd ask questions. And he was curious. He'd know what was going on. He'd got his basic training, he'd done his apprenticeship, he'd done his whatever was next, and he'd worked his way up. So he could apply the knowledge that the person that had come in with a degree in the first place, or master's or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
didn't know. So actually, he was better at um, connecting with the operators. He was better at connecting with the engineers, with the support staff. And
Mm-hmm.
he understood what was going wrong. And actually, he was a really massive asset to the company because he got a company in to bring everybody up to the same standard. Okay, it
Mm-hmm.
took time and it took money. The whole 500 of us went through the same program. But then, because we'd all been through the same program, the improvement program, we applied the same standards throughout the whole organization. We built the SOPs to match what we were actually doing. We worked together in teams to think about how we could improve processes. I
Mm-hmm.
remember one of them, we changed the way that the platens were designed because we were getting a lot of failures through seal integrity. So this on a sterile product, you can't use a sterile product that's not got a seal in place. And the way that it was built, it was made with like a serrated um, platen. So I don't know that that's the correct terminology, but basically this one was like that, and this one was like that. And if it was like that when you pressed it together, it was okay. But as soon as it went at the corners and something touched on one of the others, because it was just a foil layer, then you got a seal integrity failure. So they went out and they researched the alternatives, and rather than a hot seal um, platen, they moved to cold seal by pressure. But not only
Mm-hmm.
by pressure, it was flat, and we got rid
Mm-hmm.
of all the seal failures. So we were, instead of reworking and rejecting 30%, we could actually manufacture the amount of volume that we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But that was all by understanding the basics and actually thinking about how we can work together, how we can improve. And when you do all understand the basics and when you understand how the business works and you share the knowledge and you
Mm-hmm.
build the competence of your whole team, that's when you can
Yeah.
achieve more because you understand each other's job.
Right.
I had
Now,
to,
now your opinion here. I have been at some Asia manufacturers like automobile. I did also work when I was I'm around my 20s. I worked for General Motors and back in Brazil. I was exposed in the production environment as well. And I noticed that the way the Japanese company operated with their mindset to training, um, It's very different than our side here. When they say our side, I'm talking about South and North America, Central and North America, right? Yeah, I have not experienced talked with someone on European countries to understand how the conception it is, but being exposed in those views, which is the Asia and in our side, it feels like when I was walking through the Nissan, for example,
Mhm.
production, I noticed the high quality is so strong,
Mhm.
and the training process from them, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And some companies start implementing as well. And I noticed it's something like very cultural. They take so seriously,
Mhm.
very seriously. And then the punishment, because they don't want to spend their money with the finance risk or even pay the SLAA
Mhm.
with clients. They don't want to go through that. They don't want to spend their money with lawsuits, right?
Yeah, but
And
it's more than the money for them. It's um it's like you said, the culture. The culture is very different. They're proud to deliver something. They're proud that they know something. They're proud that they understand how to do their job. They don't have the same approach that the capitalist cultures have. Um, they're more about making sure that you've done the job right, making sure that the quality of the product is right. Um, I remember Edward Deming well, I remember my studies of Edward Deming, not the person, because he was long gone when I started university, but he was rejected by the US and he was welcomed in Japan. So Deming's principles grew in Japan, not in the US. Um, and the PDCA cycle, which a lot of now quality systems rely on, was originated in the US but rejected and accepted and built on in Japan. So you will find that the Asian countries are ahead. And the reason that they got a lot of support was Hiroshima. They got bombed, they got a lot of trouble, and they needed to rebuild. And you'll find similar situation. It wasn't a nuclear bomb in Germany, but after the war, they got a lot of support to rebuild. And when you send people over to help them, and they want to learn, they want to improve, then you build the training, you do the training, you build the competence, and you get people to the level that they can actually do the job, not just give them an SOP to read. Because you're building from scratch. Everybody's learning from the basics and going upwards. And there's lots of different quality tools that you can use. But if you try and start at the top with a DOE, design of experiments, when you haven't learned how to analyze the data, when you haven't done your um, uh, Pareto analysis, then you're never going to get to the point where you want to be. Because you can't say, well, that this experiment failed because you haven't got the understanding of the data at the base level that goes into your analysis.